Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So the topic of my video today is a sort of cluster of issues that I've been thinking about for a long time, sort of in my own practical life around communication dynamics and the use of apps in dating culture, and on a wider and more philosophically interesting note, questions about, the necessity of feminism for just living a practical, anchored life. And I really wanted to start this discussion, this video essay, with a story that sort of woke me up to the devastating nature of our predicament, at least as far as I understand it. And it's a story of how I met a person that was a good friend of mine for a number of years. We dated briefly, but we're quite good friends. And we met on a dating app, and we agreed to go on a date. And it was dinner at a strip mall. It was not a great date. It was fine because the other person was really cool, but wasn't adventurous in any way. And so we talked to each other quite a bit. This person was an ER doctor, and I'm always just very excited and inspired by healthcare workers because psychologically their normal is everyone else's emergency. So of course we all owe our healthcare workers, especially in the light of the last 2 years, an infinite debt of gratitude. But for me, as a philosopher, I like talking to healthcare professionals for psychological reasons, namely that their average everyday work is pretty much everyone else's disaster, especially if you were like this person was an emergency room physician. So we talked a lot about that, and it was really great. And by the end of the first dinner, we talked, and I wouldn't say that sparks were flying at all, really. We did enjoy each other's company quite a bit, and the conversation was excellent. And I just had a lot of admiration and respect for this person because she had a very grounded way of communicating, like nothing could stop her. That she was just very steady and strong and smart, and I just enjoyed her company. And so we agreed that we would hang out again, but that the next time we should really go do something in the world. And so we agreed that we would go swimming. There was a pool near where I was living at the time that had lane swimming. So we went lane swimming the second time, and it was fun. We had a lot of fun. But by the end of the second date, I was very confused. I didn't really know whether or not I had strong romantic feelings for this person. I was attracted to her. I enjoyed her company, but I couldn't really detect what she was thinking and feeling. And so when we were wrapping up, we went swimming, we went and got some food. And then as we were wrapping up, I just asked her, I just kind of checked in with her and said, like, how are you feeling about this? From my end, I really enjoy spending time with you. I don't feel a lot of urgency on the romantic level. I could see it going in that direction, but I think right now I'm just kind of content to hang out and be friends and see how it goes. And she said, I feel exactly the same way, and like I'm open to something more, but right now I just really like hanging out and being friends, and let's go swimming again next week and get food. And I was like, yeah, that's great. So that was what we did for a while, for quite a while, actually. It was several months, and once every week or two we would hang out and go swimming and get some brunch, and that was sort of our routine. And it was a really, really wonderful thing for quite a long time. And so what happened was the next week we didn't hang out. So there was a 2-week gap between the second time we saw each other and the third time. And during that time we had some text messages back and forth, and she sent me this long text message and saying to me, I just really want to thank you, for what you did. And I was like, what did I do? What are you talking about? She's like, well, I just really appreciated how you checked in on me and you asked how I was feeling and you wanted to know what I was thinking. And I'm just not used to being asked those kinds of questions in the context of dates. And it was really refreshing. And I felt really, good about it. And I was like, holy shit, is the bar low? And the reason I had that thought was that when I reflected on my own motivations for checking in, my reasons were almost purely prudential, right? I wasn't trying to be a moral exemplar. I was really just not clear about what was going on. And so I was looking for clarification so that I could have reasonable expectations and be practical about what was going on between me and this new person. And so even just in the attempt to clarify, the dynamics that were unfolding there, I showed up for this person as just being supererogatory, right? Like just really going above and beyond what they were expecting. And when I realized that that kind of basic, practical, rational respect for another person shows up as being way above the bar, it made me realize just how low the bar is. And that was a really transformative experience for me. And so I'm very grateful to her for being that person for me. And so the question I've been thinking about since then, years later, is why is the bar so low? And I think there are people out there, feminist theorists and psychologists, who could probably answer this question with a bit more precision than I could. But one thing I do want to suggest is that in our culture, I think one of the reasons the bar is so low is that we are still, and here I'm going to just keep my remarks confined to relationship dynamics that exist between men and women, because that's all I really know about from first personal experience. And I know that there are a lot more other ways of understanding romantic relationships and dating, and I don't want to take away from those. I'm not in a position to speak about them with any authority. I'm not sure I'm in a position to speak about heteronormative romantic relationships with any authority either, but they are the only sorts of romantic relationships with which I have any experience. So that's why I'm simply going to confine my remarks to that subset of relationships. So why is the bar so low? Well, one hypothesis I've been playing with, and I've fleshed this out with a number of friends of mine in my life who seem to think that I'm onto something. So I share it here with some degree of confidence that there's at least something to it. The hypothesis is that as a culture, we're still learning how to treat women like people instead of as things. And I think that because we're still learning to do that, when women get treated like people, that shows up as being supererogatory. That shows up as being morally exemplary. And that's where the sort of cognitive dissonance comes in. And, I think one way of understanding this hypothesis is to think about the phenomena of generational trauma. So a lot of research has been done on this about Holocaust survivors, but I think when we look at the plight of women, we get a much deeper, longer picture in the following sense. When you are literally property for thousands of years, when you live in a world where other people control what you do with your body, whether or not you get to vote, this is really the essence of objectification. And even though now in the 21st century, a lot of progress has been made in terms of the rules we play by in society, both in terms of the laws that we write down and police, but also in terms of the standards that we embody in our social democracy. I think a lot of those rules have changed over the last 100 years in particular. But changes in the letter of the law does not immediately entail changes in the pre-reflective motivational architecture of the people who live in the society. Those changes take longer. And so I think that strange patterns of objectification still exist in how we relate to each other, especially in the context of romantic relationships, and that this objectification, this not really knowing how to treat women like people is a serious problem. And I think there are two ways that men tend to objectify women. One is obvious, right? One is when we denigrate and demean women and treat them like objects, treat them like things in the sense of being either an object of sexual regard or just less than a person, when we're cruel. And I think that's still prevalent in a number of explicit and maybe more subtle and implicit ways. But I also think that we dehumanize women, we objectify women by treating them as magical fairy princesses that we worship on a pedestal, who are sent from, some other world to solve all of our problems for us. And so I see that demeaning a woman and worshiping her are two sides of the same coin of objectification and depersonalization, one through the lens of denigration and one by veneration. Both actually turn the person into an object, because no one is divine. So we're all finite, we're all imperfect, and that's what it means to be a person. So whether or not we lower or elevate, we are still erasing a horizontal plane on which we should all strive to interact with each other, especially women. So why does this happen? I have some suspicions, and I think that I don't have the full expertise to unpack this with the level of precision that I would like. So my next hypothesis is very tentative, but I think that the urge to denigrate or deify a woman comes from an emotional reaction to awe. I think that, and I can speak for myself as a heterosexual man here, I think when you encounter beauty in the world, you feel awe. You are in awe of that beauty. And I think that when we feel awe towards something, we want to have a relationship to it. And when that awe comes in the form of a romantic attraction to a person, we want to be with that person. And when we can't, which often happens, we denigrate that person or we deify them. We find some way to make sense of the difference that takes away their personhood. We either denigrate them to feel better about ourselves and impose distance that gives us control, or we deify and we put them on a pedestal and we worship them. And neither one of those reactions are healthy or good in any way. And it really, I think, affects communication dynamics. And it gets fed into and reified by the phenomenon of dating apps. Now, I actually am a fan of dating apps. I have no interest in using them right now, but I think that they have done some good for us. I think they take a lot of guesswork out of approaching strangers, which is really helpful for helping people avoid unwanted attention when they're out in the world. But I think that this problem that I'm describing about communication dynamics and objectification is actually to a certain extent fed into and reified or sort of ossified by certain patterns that I've noticed in dating apps. So there's a kind of numbers game that you have to learn to use dating apps successfully if you're a straight man. And what that looks like is basically a ratio of communication. So if you want to meet people on dating apps and you're a man, you need to send out quite a large number of opening hello, how do you do's. And there are certain scripts for how to do that effectively. I'm not going to cash those out right now. But if you're good and you're skillful and you are past a certain threshold of conventional attractiveness and you know how to capture that with photographs, then you'll send out maybe 30 to 40 messages, maybe as high as 50 or 60. And of those, you'll get anywhere from 10 to 15 responses, which will then turn into conversations, which if you're lucky and skillful will yield 3 to 5 first dates. So that's quite a compression of numbers. Now, I don't know what it's like to be a woman on dating apps, and frankly, I don't want to because it sounds like a nightmare. But one thing I do know about it is that it is much more of a filtering exercise. You are, if you're a woman on a dating app, you're sort of fending off a lot of attention and trying to find signal through noise. You are inundated with messages and you're sorting through them to find out who might be worthy of your attention. So what that does psychologically is that if and when you finally get into the real world with somebody, the woman, statistically speaking, could be anywhere else at that time if she wanted to be. But that man, statistically speaking, has nowhere else to be, because the amount of work it took to send out an opening message, have a conversation, get out into the world on a first date must be scaled against any number of other failed first attempts. And again, this isn't to say that this isn't a universal law. I'm not saying this is how it always is, but I think this is how it is always for the most part. And what that means is that the man is normally trying to perform a version of himself to like impress the woman, and the woman is waiting to be impressed. And there's a certain bit of justice in that. I think I don't think that it's intrinsically problematic that things can, often shake out this way at all. But psychologically, it puts people in almost completely opposite perspectives, right? One is like, show me that you're worth my time. And the other is, I had to work so hard to be here. What do I need to do to keep your attention? And that's not an easy dynamic to overcome to actually achieve some real intimacy or chemistry. And so I mentioned that just as a way of trying to foreground the way in which certain deep problematic gender dynamics are in some ways exacerbated by modern technology. And I think that modern technology has helped relieve certain stresses, especially for women who don't want unwanted attention when they're out in the world. So I'm not trying to say we should change anything about it. I just think it's something to keep in mind so that you can, deal with the chaos of modern dating. But the question I want to conclude with, which I think is even more important, is the question of, well, are we really ready for things to change? And I think we want them to change, but at this stage of the game, I think we are still struggling to socialize and accept men as emotional beings with deep attachment needs. A very strong narrative that I see on social media is around allowing men to be emotional and to try and abandon these scripts about strength. And I think this is correct. And I think that internalized misogyny affects everyone, not only in how we see and treat women and how we objectify them in ways that I've just described, but also of men and what is appropriate for them to do and what is not appropriate for them to do. And I think that it's all harmful. But I can only speak for myself as a man. I think I've experienced tremendous pressure to project strength and hide weakness, and had many experiences of trying to let walls down and be more emotional or vulnerable, and being punished for being too emotional or too weak or too needy. And there's a very good chance that that's just my problem, and maybe I need to grow up and thicken my skin and be better, but I'm open to that. But I also think that, and want to tentatively suggest that our culture still has some growing to do, and that we're still creating victims without meaning to, because our norms around gender dynamics and relationships are in the process of changing, and that they need to continue to change so that the aspiration of emotional vulnerability for men becomes a reality. Because just because we change the rules and the scripts around that doesn't mean we're actually prepared as men to be emotional, because we've repressed a lot of our emotions for a long time. And so expressing them skillfully is sometimes a challenge. And also to have that received by others in a skillful, nurturing way. I think we're still learning to do this work as a culture, and that it's good work. And I'm actually very, very hopeful about this, because even though the changes are slow and generational, I think that the new generation is a reason to feel really good about our progress on this issue. So for example, I have a 12-year-old child, and when I observe them with their friends and I listen to them talk about their friends and the way these children support each other and care for each other and touch each other, it's remarkable. It's remarkably loving and soft and kind and forward-facing and inclusive. And it's really quite humbling to see how much progress our children have made in being decent, in being skillfully vulnerable and emotional across gender lines, and in all kinds of different relationship configurations. And so I can't help but feel inspired by the next generation. And as a parent of that generation, I feel very honored to be there in that role to try and facilitate that growth. So I think there's hope, and I hope that also that what I've laid out today is of some interest or use to you. And if you have any questions or concerns, or if I missed anything, again, I want to be very tentative about everything I've said today. I don't claim to have all the answers. These are more questions for me than answers, really, even though I kind of put them in the form of hypotheses. But I hope the conversation can continue in various ways. So thank you for your attention.